For fans of old-school shooters, avid fans of flesh and blood, we have compiled a selection of the best, in our opinion, games similar to Doom. Wrath. Aeon of Ruin is a project of 3D Realms, the studio that created the unforgettable Duke Nukem. The game is based on the engine of the first Quake, and in general it corresponds to the genre of retro shooters as much as possible. Fast, furious, and without unnecessary elements like pumping, long cutscenes, and characters with complex character. If we talk about the plot, it's more like Heretic or Painkiller, but in terms of gameplay speed, Wrath. Aeon of Ruin is closer to Doom. However, it could also be classified as similar to Quake, Blood, Unreal, and other classic shooters, which are generally very similar to each other. Hellbound is a brutal and bloody shooter in a dark techno-fantasy setting. Like in Doom, there is a very cool protagonist who doesn't think, doesn't care about anything. Driven by the thirst for revenge, he shoots, hacks, chops demons, moves only by streaming and double jumping, and uses a huge arsenal of weapons to deal with enemies. In addition to the fast-paced gameplay, the game features stylish visuals, an ear-splitting soundtrack, and expansive locations filled with secrets and hiding places. Project Warlock. Created for fans of Doom, Hexen, and Wolfenstein, this first-person shooter bears a strong resemblance to those games. Even the design and animation of some weapons look very familiar. Project Warlock features 60 levels, filled with enemies of all stripes and locations scattered all over the world, from Antarctic ice to medieval castles. The game also features an ingenious leveling system that allows you to convert your experience into magic buffs.
Project Warlock.
Iron Fury, another game from 3D Realms, is dedicated to Shelley Harrison, a femme fatale who easily kills any opponent. She has already appeared on the screens of monitors in the isometric shooter Bombshell 2016 release. Now the heroine has a new mission: to stop the sinister doctor from conducting his inhuman experiments. Ion Fury is made on the build engine, the same engine that created the legendary Duke Nukem 3D, Blood and Shadow Warrior. So it is literally a retro shooter, not a pretend project on a modern engine. In terms of gameplay, players can expect a hurricane of gunfire, explosions, and hand-to-hand combat, all backed by a dynamic soundtrack. Dusk is another retro shooter inspired by the legends of the 90s. Players await encounters with mystical creatures, and to kill them they can use a wide arsenal of cool weapons, from sickles, swords, and crossbows to double-barreled shotguns, grenade launchers, and rocket launchers. The enemies are not smart, but they take numbers, so quick reactions and competent use of landscape features are more than necessary here. The moderately complex, pleasant, and addictive shooter in the spirit of the old school. Hypnotically bright, sour, and ultra-fast shooter that looks like Doom's complexity and dynamics have been pushed to the max. Host Void's protagonist is literally drained of life, and in order to maintain it, he must kill enemies. You have to rush through procedurally generated levels and try to fight your opponents as efficiently as possible. Slowing down is like death, so the fewer shots you use on a monster, the better. An experimental shooter in which everything, movements, shots, and attacks, follows the rhythm of the soundtrack. Quite heavy, by the way. Accordingly, the player has to adapt to the music, which makes the gameplay a bit unusual. DPM, Bullets per minute is a shooter with roguelike elements, which means that each new playthrough will be different from the previous one. As locations, enemies and weapons are generated anew. We can complain about the toxic color scheme, but otherwise we have a great retro-style shooter. Turbo Overkill is a shooter from the point of view of the protagonist from independent developers, which will please you with its cyberpunk style and depressing atmosphere of the City of Paradise. The user will have to engage in fierce battles with enemies controlled by artificial intelligence. The gameplay of Turbo Overkill is characterized by dynamics, scary-looking enemies, and sophisticated FPS mechanics. The protagonist named Johnny Turbo is armed to the teeth and can handle the strongest villains. The player will have to move a lot, shoot constantly from all barrels, and use various chips of the project, including portals, accelerators, springboards. The Hard Reset re-release offers users the chance to meet Major Fletcher, known to many old-school shooter fans. The game is set in the city of Bazor. The veteran, drawn into the conflict, will have to get to the bottom of the unpleasant truth and withstand the onslaught of hordes of enemies. Gameplay Hard Reset is close to Doom and Quake, which is reminded by the classic mechanics. For those users who prefer brutal gameplay, powerful weapons at their disposal, and a dark atmosphere, the project is definitely worth a look. Metal. Hellsinger is an FPS with chiseled gameplay that offers users to terrorize hordes of infernal creatures to the rhythms of metal. At the user's disposal comes a half-human, half-demon that goes to exterminate all sorts of creatures from the underworld. The process of destroying monsters is inseparable from the music under which you must unload the clip. As you get into the rhythm, the damage will increase. By the way, the arsenal will please fans of the genre. Developers offer a dozen of weapons from bone scythe to shotgun. Deadlink is an FPS roguelike in a cyberpunk atmosphere where you take control of an AKB agent, complete the tasks within the experiment, and be ready to meet strong opponents. The main features of Deadlink gameplay should be recognized as the use of protagonist autonomous shell, which has an incredible combat potential. In addition, users are waiting for all the mechanics, characteristic for classic FPS. If you like Doom, Deadlink is recommended as an alternative. Ziggurat is a fantasy steampunk shooter with RPG elements where players are invited to visit dungeons filled with ancient evil, fight numerous enemies, and try to find a way out of a difficult situation. Ziggurat's gameplay is made in the classic style with mechanics inherent in such cult hits as Doom. The fate of the protagonist depends on the user's reaction speed, shooting accuracy, and maneuvering skills. Evaluate procedurally generated locations and try to reach the end. It just won't happen. Crossbow Bloodnight, FPS arena, where the user's task will be to exterminate the evil. The shooter is characterized by hardcore difficulty and endless gameplay. At the same time, monsters will have to be destroyed from a magic crossbow, pumped by the souls of defeated enemies. It should be noted that the gameplay of Crossbow Bloodnight keeps the user in constant tension. It is impossible to take a break, because every moment can be fatal for the hero. If you are not afraid of high complexity and want to dive into the atmosphere similar to that realized in Doom, the project deserves your attention. Templar is an FPS that offers elements of old-school shooters and hardcore difficulty. At first glance, the project is sloppy and simple for a modern user. However, the game can be transformed by using 5 filters that dramatically change the visual perception. The gameplay of Dread Templar does not differ from the most grueling representatives of the genre. Here, you will have to move a lot, slow down time, use an impressive arsenal, and combine skills with upgrades. The game will also please you with 2.5 dozen levels with side zones and hiding places. Medieval is an old-school shooter inspired by the cult Heretic. The gameplay is focused on fighting numerous enemies using the protagonist's magical abilities and cold weapons. It is worth mentioning the artificial intelligence of the enemies, which is quite well realized in a Medieval. It is enough to create great difficulties for the player.
You stand alone.
Scathe is a bloody FPS about fighting horrible demonic creatures in the spirit of Doom. The game uses classic old-school shooter mechanics, as well as the inherent atmosphere of retro hits. Scathe can be played not only alone, but also in company. Network multiplayer allows you to invite your friends to help you fend off hordes of enemies with a single set of lives for all squad members. Boltgun, made in the canons of the 90s, combines old-school gameplay with the characteristic style of the time. Doom-style gameplay will definitely not disappoint fans of the genre. At the disposal of the user will be a space trooper who is destined to fight with waves of enemies on a dangerous mission. Dynamic battles with monsters and classic mechanics will make you feel nostalgic for the old days. If your favorite game is not included in this list, write in the comments. Thank you for watching. Please read the description for more details. If you enjoyed the video, please support the channel with a super thanks, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to watch more.